Why it makes sense to rent. I'm just going to do some random thinking here and just a stream of consciousness. I've always felt, actually, for a long time, I've always felt that there's going to be some opportunity for my generation. I don't even know what generation I am, the baby bust, I guess, to buy second homes, mountain homes, beachfront homes because of global warming. No, I don't believe in that. But because of the fact there's going to be a huge influx of supply from the wealthy baby boomers who are selling and selling and selling so they can go into their assisted living communities. And there's not that many buyers coming up from my generation or the generation after me. I don't even know what is that millennial generation? Well, I don't know what it is. And so you're going to have this huge amount of wealthy baby boomers, the wealthiest generation in the history of the world, that bought, there's a band called Tree, and they have a song called Negative Hippie. They're doing all the products, smoking all the dope, having all the sex, and sending us the bill. That's what they call for Negative Hippie, because all these baby boomers were hippies to yuppies. It's just funny. They said they call them hippies to yuppies. I completely don't be offended by this, my friends, but I think you have to admit there is some the narcissism among that generation is legendary for sure. They want it now. It's theirs for the taking. And I'm not saying they didn't have hard times, but a lot of those guys they've lived very, very comfortably without question. If you served in Vietnam, if you were not even just served in Vietnam, but if you served in the military, that's not applicable to you. But if you, I hate to say it, we're just in college your whole life, and you had a good life, and there's nothing wrong with that. You shouldn't feel guilty. But you were the exception, not the rule for the history of the world. It's true. So you think about all these people who just had abundance, more than there's so much abundance that now they're on college campuses they just can't believe how good they have it. So they've taken over college campuses, and now they're saying we have to, just the insanity of what they're trying to do. Because when you have it so good, it's like my man Michael Ramsden says, it's affluenza. And Michael Ramsden is an apologist, Christian apologist, and he says, you have it so good, you got to find something in which to hang your hat on and stake the flag down and say, on this we'll defend. And it's just weird. So you have this huge wealth of baby boomers that are getting sick, getting old, getting run down. They don't want their second homes anymore. I'm not quite sure we're there yet. I'm 49. I bet 5 years from now, I bet you could find a pretty significant house in the mountains or on the ocean front. Maybe not the ocean front, because there's always going to be rich people to replace those. But I bet you can find some pretty steep discounts on second homes. Anyway, so I'm watching this YouTube channel my man Rob sent to me. It's I can't remember what it's called. I'll put a link in the show notes, and I just subscribed because it's I find it absolutely fundamentally I find it incredibly interesting, and I find it absolutely of value, B. I'm not saying it's all I agree with. I think it's called Money and Gold or something, Gold and Silver. I'll put the link in the show notes. And it's a lot of these people are gold bugs, and they always get discounted like they're gold bugs, and because we hear all the Porter Stansbury stuff and Harry Dents of the world with all their negativity out there. But just because those guys are obviously pushing fear, pushing a product, doesn't mean there's not some legitimacy behind the thought process here. So anytime you have a huge supply, and you have a limited demand, what does that do to price? So supply is going up, demand is going down. What does that do to price? Well, it drops the price. The exact opposite. Anytime you have a huge demand and you have a limited supply, the price goes up, which is why you see treasury bonds trading at so low yields, because the demand is through the roof. So you have a huge supply in the the second home market, and you just don't have that many people who have the cash flow to buy it. And a lot of reasons, because of student loan debt, they got their own mortgages and whatnot. The price of real estate has gone through the roof, and the incomes haven't followed. So this guy's watching, he gave a story about his own history with his dad and then himself. And I thought this was pretty interesting, and I want to share it with you. So let's get the trusty PVC pipe. So his example, and there is, you always got to look a little bit deeper than just an anecdote and using it for the media, and I'll share with you why. But there's some truth behind this that you need to understand. All right, so his dad was in the war, fought the Germans and the Nazis, and came back and bought a house, and he lived in Salem, Oregon, wherever that is, He was managing an auto parts store, like what is it? O'Reilly's, O'Reilly, something like that. And then we got Advanced Auto Parts and whatnot. And he was making in 1955 in Oregon $9,600 a year, of which he paid $1,160 in tax. His effective tax rate is about $12,000. All right, but the median home in Salem, Oregon, was only $8,500. So you see where I'm going with this. After taxes, in one fell swoop, he could have bought a home. Obviously, he wouldn't be able to do that one fell swoop because he's still got to put food on the table. But the median home in Salem, Oregon was $8,500, or I guess I should say the state of Oregon, because the Census Bureau doesn't, at least I can see, doesn't divide it up to individual towns, it's just state. But you get where I'm going with this. He made $8,500 net of tax. The median home was $8,500. I mean, he could essentially buy a house with 1 year's salary. Now, fast forward to 2015, or I should say, well, I guess we could say it doesn't matter, but just say 2015. It's actually 2018. But I was just thinking, like Marty McFly, 1955 to 2015 and 1985. Anyway, so the median income, the median household income in the United States is a little bit less than $60,000. The taxes on that would be about $9,000 when you add FICA. There is no FICA back here, none whatsoever, just income tax. So the tax is about 15%. I'm saying, roughly 8, 9, 10% on the state and feds, and then you add another 7.65 to FICA. So you're left with $51,000, but the median home is $220,000. So it takes 4 years of income to buy a house after tax. Here it only took 1 year of income, roughly, to buy a house. Isn't that interesting? In fact, I looked at the numbers, and if you look not just in Oregon, but I looked at the Census Bureau numbers, the median house in the U.S. was $44,000. If I can find my pen, man. The median, here we go. In 1950 is $44,000. Median home, and that's the entire U.S., $44,000. And then the median income in the U.S. was just under $40,000. Just under $40,000. So even, probably take a year and 3 months in which to buy a house back then. And so the issue that we have here is that you can buy a pretty significant house on very limited down payment, which means a lot of people are buying more than they really can afford. Now so listen, check this out. So this is one of the reasons why it makes sense to rent. When you think about it like this, so if you go back to what I was just talking about, the second homes, there's going to be a huge supply coming to the market, and there's going to be limited demand. What's going to happen in the primary homes too, though? All right, how many people were in the baby boom versus how many people are in the baby bust versus how many people can afford a house, even the millennial generation and whatnot. I mean, we know a lot of these people are living in their parents' garage. Why? Because they don't have money. They have too much debt. They don't have positive cash flow. They can't find a job that pays that well. And they can find a job, but not that they pay that well. And then they got this friggin' student loans too. So if you think about it like that, back then, hopefully this will work well, we had a huge, that's demand, because equals a population. What do we have now? Population. But then you got to go down even worse. Who's going to afford it? Who have the cash flow? All right, so we have a huge demand back then. No one had debt. They were making money that was relative to the first 1 year's salary, net of taxes, equal to the cost of a home. No debt at all, no student loans, nothing like that. And there's a huge population too. So there's a gigantic demand. Gigantic demand does what? It increases prices. Price. So now you fast forward, homes are incredibly more expensive because the prices are based on these guys here. Because this demand is still huge. Even today the demand is gigantic. And then low interest rates too. But now you can have a low barrier to entry, which increases the prices as well because it's easier to get the money to borrow as long as you can afford it. And so because here you weren't getting 5% down payment mortgages. You just couldn't. Here you can 5% down payment mortgages, but the 5% down payment mortgages has got to be on a price that's significantly higher than it was back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s because the prices of these homes have just gone crazy because of huge demand for houses. The population has shrunk significantly, and the population can actually afford it because they have money. Positive cash flow has shrunk significantly too. But then we also have still a low barrier to entry, cheap money, and low interest rates. So both those things add to the demand, the price going up as well. All right, but let's change these people from a demand to a supply. All right, so this is what we're living in here, my generation. We're living in paying high prices for houses because this generation right here was just huge, and they had the ability to buy up houses because they just did not have the debt that we have, or never mind the generations behind us. So now let's change this to supply. And again, supply population, because we got people getting older. They're selling their houses. Talked to a lady today or emailing who I'm going to do a podcast with who runs an assisted living facility. I said, hey, I'd love to interview you for my podcast. She goes, that's great. I'm just so freaking swamped. I got 10 people on my waiting list now. So supply. And so what do you think these people are doing when they're on the waiting list? They're selling their houses to get into that assisted living facility. So increasing supply, decreasing price. The demand here is still low because there's only so many people that can afford it. There's still low barrier to entry and still low interest rates. So this will have some effect for sure on keeping the price a little bit higher, but this is going to dwarf that right there. The supply is going to dwarf the low barrier to entry and the low interest rates, because low interest rates simply might knock off $200 or $300 a month on your mortgage, because for every 1% increase, it's like $300, and it depends on your price of your house. But just say for 1% interest rates, it might be $300 to $400 a month in cash flow. So $5,000 a year. But as supply comes down, we're talking significant decline.